Before the Ranger Creed is recited by a formation of Rangers at any ceremony, you will always hear the narrator say this: "Will all Rangers, past and present, please join us as we recite the Ranger Creed." Every Ranger will stand, and as they say those six stanzas, they are transformed back to a time when they had the pleasure and the burden of this brotherhood. That feeling is hard to describe. However, it's one that never leaves you. It's a connection that spans the globe and can be reignited when you hear the phrase, "Hey, Ranger, what battalion you from?" Amongst this formation, there are Rangers that stand out. They are legends of this elite organization. When their names are spoken, people instantly have a story and for a moment relive it. Legend of the 75th podcast wants to capture that feeling and those emotions. We want to ensure that these legends' triumphs and sacrifices never fade away. So sit back with your favorite adult beverage and listen to stories from the Legend of the 75th. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Legend of the 75th. Real quick, before I introduce our guest, if you haven't got a chance, head over to the new website. We got all the podcasts loaded up there. We got all the blog loaded up there. We got some of our products, a little bit of conversations about the nonprofit and some of the other work we're doing. So head over there. There's a lot of information and a lot of what we're doing and what the future of Legends of the 75th is all about. So head on over to the website. But I have the absolute honor, and I've actually been trying to get Brian on for a while. You know, he's a little bit elusive now in his retirement, but it's okay. I'm persistent, and we finally kind of locked into time. We had a little bit of computer issues, no big deal. And but I'm honored to introduce Brian Garganta to Legend of the 75th podcast. If you don't know who he is, he entered the Army in 1983, retired in 2007, had a total of 9 deployments, served in 375, 275, and also RHQ. But back then it wasn't really RHQ, so we'll talk about that. And did a little bit of time also in some other units, 7th RTB and 101st. So Brian, anyway, enough of that. We've already been talking before the episode. It's an honor to have you on, man. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great, man. Honored to be here. Never thought I'd be the one that would be on one of these podcasts, that's for sure.
Well, a lot of people probably look at Birkin and they're like, why is that guy running the fucking podcast? And I'm like, well, because I bought a microphone and I bought a flashy, nice logo. So shut the fuck up. It's my podcast. It's cheaper than therapy. That's what I tell people. Podcast, it's cheaper than therapy.
It's good to me, man. I'll buy that.
Yeah. Well, Brian, one other thing I forgot actually too. You were also Charlie Company alumni, predecessor to me as a first sergeant at Charlie Company. So we have 2 former Charlie Company first sergeants on the podcast, which is always awesome to do as well. So, but if you would, man, just like start, why did you join the military? What was the driving factor there? And, why'd you do it in the 80s other than Rambo?
No, I grew up that way. I knew from an early age I was going to join the military. I lived in Wilmington, North Carolina with my mom, but I grew up a lot with my grandparents out in Brunswick County, and that was in the swamp. That was 15 miles down a dirt road with no electricity. So I grew up like that. Especially all summer long, and then through the through the year on the weekends. And it was just that mentality. I knew I was going to join the military. Really didn't know what I was going to do in the Army. My real father was a Marine. Never knew him. Don't really care about him. But being in Wilmington, Camp Lejeune was close by. I was like, well, I'll go do that. But when I got there, I asked to be in the infantry. That's what I wanted to make sure I did, was just be in the infantry. And they wanted me to be a truck driver, and I ain't driving no damn truck, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Joining the military to do, so I just walked next door, and I asked them, the Army, like, hey, I want to join, I want to be in the infantry, and they had no problems with it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Problems whatsoever. They're like, hey, take this test, and a couple weeks later, I was on my way. I was gone. Enjoyed every minute of it. Was lucky enough to make it to Ranger School. And
you went to Ranger School from the 101st, correct?
Ranger School from the 101st, and it was sort of kind of by accident, to tell you the truth. I'd never heard of the Ranger battalions or anything like that growing up.
Oh, okay.
And when in the 101st, I was like, well, I want to do something, blah, blah, blah. And they was like, well, we got this Ranger School slot. And I was like, okay, well, I'll try that. And started in February, and graduated, first time go all the way through on my birthday, April the 5th.
Nice.
So, I mean, as soon as I found out that, our graduation day was going to be my birthday, I was like, I ain't feeling none of this shit. I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, right.
Best birthday gift I had, right there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I gotta be honest, when I look at guys that recycle, I'm like, ugh, man, I don't know if I would have done that. Why do the prolonged course? That seems miserable.
I mean, I just didn't, it was winter too, and so,
Yeah, that's true. So when you were in Ranger School, is that kind of the first interaction you had with like bad boys? Was there bad boys in your squads and stuff? And did they make an impression on you?
they did. And then when I got back to Ranger Battalion, or back to the 101st, then I met some other people like, hey, the regiment this, regiment that, and I tried to get the regiment back then,
Uh-huh.
and it was, you put in a 4187 and try to
Right.
get there, and it wasn't as easy as you think, so it took a little while, and I, went to RTB, was a ranger instructor there in the desert from 92, 93 time frame.
So you were in desert phase, and in RI in desert phase. I've never talked to anybody that was an RI in desert phase. Wow. Okay. What was that like?
Dugway, and when I went to Ranger School, it was in Dugway, and then when I taught, it was at McGregor Range out there off of Fort Bliss. And I think
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay. Okay. Yeah, wow. That's what was desert phase like? Because I mean, it's like one of those almost kind of urban lores. Like no one knows about that shit nowadays.
it was cold, man, and Dugway. So
Yeah, I bet.
I remember we were walking patrols, and you'd see the wild Mustangs running. I was waiting to see people starting to glow at night, because there was all them chemicals back there in that facility anyway.
I didn't think of that. Okay. Yeah,
But
that's funny.
ass off. And we didn't carry sleeping bags in winter phase back then. We just took cold weather pants, the big parka, with the little fur on it, and the VB
Oh,
boots.
okay. Yeah.
That's what we carried in our rucksacks to sleep in. Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, you got to have a whoopee, so we had our whoopies with us.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. There's always room for the whoopee. I don't fucking care. You're gonna make room for that shit. Yeah, absolutely. That in Copenhagen. You're always gonna find room for that.
I didn't dip Copenhagen then. That was the wild thing.
What? No, you're full of shit, man. You were born with Copenhagen in your mouth.
My grandmother, she did that snuff that was in that little white thing. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. That's funny.
Until I became a ranger instructor.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That checks. I'm surprised they didn't bring Desert Phase back with the GWAT. Like, now that I think about it, it's like they probably should have done that. I mean, that would have actually made sense.
It was good training. When we were at Dugway, you did live fires there too.
Oh, okay.
The last phase when I went through Ranger School, so we went from being in the mountains to Florida, and then from Florida to Dugway. So by the time you got there, you were warned, And one of the last things we did was we did a little platoon live fire out there. I remember walking over that hill in the snow trying to do that live fire, but it was cold there.
Yeah, I bet. I do remember like yeah, I remember I can't remember who it was. They were telling me about Desert Phase, but basically that hill that you're talking about, pretty much all you ever did, you just walked away from the hill and then you walked back to the fucking hill. And that's pretty much all you did in Desert Phase. That's what they go.
I do.
That's funny. So you're at 7th RTB, and then you were kind of saying before the podcast that Sergeant Major Bean, saw something in you, and then that kind of started the journey to Ranger Regiment.
I was leaving RTB, and there was a guy there named I don't know if you remember Hugh Roberts.
Oh yeah. Oh hell, yeah.
His last name was Hughes or something like that.
Oh, okay.
So I can't remember. He was from I think he started in 2nd Battery. He might have started in 3rd Bat, but then anyway, he helped me get into in the rope and Sergeant Major Beam. I remember going to the rope board and do you remember Sergeant Major Piggery or First Sergeant Piggery?
That name sounds really familiar. I can't place the face though, but I do.
And he looked at me and he's like, Sergeant, you got a dip in your mouth? And I'm, my lips look like they got dip in them, but they don't. And Sergeant Major Beams looked at me and said, no, he's just got big gums.
That's funny.
No, I ain't got no dip in.
That's funny as shit. Okay, so so you go to 375 off the bat and you go over to Charlie Company as a squad leader. So, what we classify, and you've heard it plenty of times, as an import, what was that like? You'd had your 101st time, your time at 7th RTB, but actually going to a Ranger regiment in 375, and at this point, by the time you'd gotten there, yeah.
I mean, you got certain expectations of what's going to take place, and that train don't slow down for you to get on.
No, it doesn't.
That's 100 miles an hour, so you better jump on and with both hands and just keep going. And that's what I did. And I was lucky enough to have some good people there with me to help me along, show me the curve, show me the right way to do things, as the regiment wanted to, and they gave me a chance. And I'm not going to say I excelled, but I made it all the way to first sergeant in the regiment, which it was better than anything I ever dreamed of. And it was the best life I could have had. Was being that first sergeant, going all the way from squad leader up.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to spend the end of my career, or the midsection to the end of my career in the regiment, and the best kept secret in the army is right there.
Yeah, 100%. I don't disagree at all. So, talk to us a little bit about, your time in 375, squad leader. How long were you in 375, and then, transition into the other battalions?
I was a squad leader for a couple of years there in Charlie Company, and then in I think it was '98. By that time we had Stanley McChrystal as the RCO.
Right.
So he's coming up with
boy, that guy is making his rounds right now. He is all over podcasts and news. Like, he is everywhere right now. It's unbelievable. He's out there. Anyway, maybe he's making a presidential run. I don't know what he's doing.
He's a man I always looked up to, especially back in those days. He was a legend back then to us. And, I didn't say I agree with them 20 and 30 milers he kept coming up with, or the like Idris that he used to like to throw on us.
Yeah.
He's the reason my feet are all jacked up the way they are now.
Yeah, no shit, right? Yeah.
Except for the world, though.
I got something funny. I want to, and Mike Hall listens to all these episodes, so it'll be funny. But he said because we just got back from the Philippines in January, and he said, why do you think we came up with a 30 miler? Well, the reason we came up with the 30 mile that distance is because of the Cabanatuan raid, and that's how far 6th Ranger Battalion, went in order to rescue the POWs. And I'm like, man, that's really freaking cool. But now that I'm back, I'm like, man, I wonder if he pulled that out of his ass. Like, I wonder if that's actually the reason.
It sounded good.
It sounds great. It sounds great. It briefs well.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the tambourine, like, well, it was to represent, the low, the desert and all this stuff. And then you talk to Sergeant Major Roberts, he's like, no, that's not fucking why we picked the tambourine.
I remember when that happened. I remember being there and everybody putting their thoughts together. What do we want to do? Do we want to keep the black when I go to it? But and I was down at Benning when we changed.
Oh, okay.
And I'll tell you what, taking that black one off and putting that tan one on, that was like 10 degrees cooler right there.
That's a fair point. That's a good point. I didn't think of that. That's true. That's true.
What I felt the first time I put on that tan when I was like standing in that formation out there, that hot Fort Benning damn sun. I was like, oh, this is way cooler. Maybe we should have thought about this a long time ago.
Maybe we should have went with white.
I like the tan beret, I mean, I like the color of it. I like the way it looks with, the uniforms now.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It
It's
is what it is. I remember all that stuff happening, the general coming by and the sergeant major army, and they were like, well, they didn't even know that there was somebody wearing black berets. I was like, really? How do you not know the Ranger Battalion is wearing black berets?
yeah, no shit, right? Yeah. Well, anyway, sorry. So we got off on a tangent. Three seven five. You're saying 98's General Crystal. Yeah, you were talking about that.
That's when I became a platoon sergeant. It was due to one of the savage strikes where one of the platoon sergeants didn't do so well or said something, and the next thing you knew, I was going over to ACO 375 to be a platoon sergeant, and that was in I think it was August or summertime frame there, and of '98, and I stayed in that platoon until November, December of 2002, being a platoon sergeant. So I lucked up and got to stay in a platoon sergeant for a good amount of time. It was over 4 years, or right around 4 years. I was the platoon sergeant for Alpha 35.
That is so crazy, and it's amazing to think of during that time frame how long they kept platoon sergeants and like even PLs and company commanders and first sergeants in place. Like, during that, that like right before the GWIDE, if you hit it just right, man, you stayed for a while. Like, Sergeant Major Albertson, and Lieutenant Colonel Cheney, they were literally our platoon sergeant and RPL for 3.5 years. I mean, Cheney was literally a PL for almost 3 years, which was fucking unheard of. Yeah.
I remember him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I ended up serving with him a couple more times. Got the honor of serving with him again when he retired out of over in Germany. So great dude, great dude. I love that guy. Yeah, he's amazing.
I remember him.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Shit, I need to reach out to him. Fuck. Freaking
I
reminds.
was to stay there as that platoon sergeant for that long a period of time, and
Wow.
I was that platoon sergeant when in 9/11 we were.
Right.
In fact,
Where were
that
you guys
morning
at?
we were doing a range density, and we were at the shoot house. We shot the night before, and we were cleaning out, moving to a support by fire range that morning. And Tom Bostic was my PL then, so it was me and Tom.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay. Wow.
Me and Tom were PL platoon sergeant, and Nino Livaday was listening on the radio, little pop-up radio, sitting on the archive, and he said, someone had ran into the World Trade Center. We started listening, and it all rolled from there. And Nino Livaday was killed on April the 3rd, 2003 at Haditha. Him and Ripito and Ryan Long. But that was when Nino was a team leader. I think he was a gun team leader, or he might have just been a regular team leader in the platoon. But
Okay. And yeah, and just for everybody that doesn't know, Major Tom Bostic, he was killed in 2007, correct? Right? Yeah, 2007.
June or July of 2007.
Yeah, and he's also Bobby Bostic, 275 guy's brother. So, and I know Bobby very, very well. So that's the significance of Tommy. And Tommy spent a lot of time in the Ranger Regiment, and then obviously, went the OCS route, and then spent time outside of the regiment as well. And he was killed as a major. So, and I'll tell you what, it's amazing. Individuals I've ran into. Sorry, I know the podcast about you, but dudes that served with Tommy, in the conventional army, especially on that deployment, they talk about like all the just how much he just saved dudes' asses and how he's just had such tactical prowess and such situational awareness. He really, really did amazing things for a lot of people on that deployment.
Good man, truly
Yeah.
missed. I mean, I hated that he was scheduled to leave the 173rd and come to 2nd Ranger Battalion when I was still there as a first sergeant.
Really? I didn't know that.
He got offered to take the reconnaissance company with the 173rd, and so he went ahead and did that, and that's where he got killed at.
No kidding. Wow.
But we did 2 deployments together.
No kidding.
We did the initial push in, and we both jumped into the Rhino, and then we did a second combat tour in '02, June. I think it was June '02, there in Asadabad.
Kidding. All right. Well, I want to pick up back up in a second and talk about your experience jumping into Rhino as a platoon sergeant. But real quick, I'm just going to break us. Hey, everybody! Thank you for tuning in. If you want to hear the rest of the story, we got a lot to talk about, a lot of ground to cover with First Sergeant Garganta. But we're going to get into it. If you want to hear the whole story, and hear everything that he's got to share about the 75th and all of his journey and everything that he was a part of, consider becoming an exclusive member. All your support and everything that you do when you sign up for that helps us preserving Ranger history. If you're not tracking, we got a lot going on right now. We got the podcast going on, we got the feature film that we're doing for the journey to Kabanaton, and a couple other short feature stuff that we're working on as well. And all efforts go towards that, because that's our single mission and that's all we're trying to do. So thank you again for tuning in, and consider becoming an exclusive member.